Wendy Anderson, Bertie Brooks, and Ron knows all those guys. And he grew up in a hockey family. Ultimately went to St. Thomas. They all got master's degrees. But at any rate, he was a star hockey player at Johnson High School and then the University of Minnesota. Played hockey there, and he played on the U.S. national team. He was drafted by the Boston Bruins, but chose not to go into professional hockey, and he can talk about that a little bit more. He ended up a school teacher, and I met him in 1973. At that time, he was the number 2 person that was signed to be a member of the Blaine High School faculty. Now, is there anybody here that went to Blaine High School? Nobody? Well, that's interesting. But anyway, there were 33 teachers in that first group of teachers at Blaine, and they did some staff training, and I was part of that group, and that's when I met Ron. And he was an English teacher, he was a hockey coach there, and he worked at Blaine High School there for a couple of years, and then went to work for Edina Realty as a sales rep. And ultimately worked his way up to be the president of the firm, and now he's the CEO of Home Services, which is a parent company. He's affiliated with Warren Buffett down in Omaha. He can tell you more of the detail there. But when we were putting together the programs for this year, our meetings here, I thought I really wanted a private sector guy, and I really wanted somebody that was a high achiever, somebody that had taken some risks, that recognized opportunities, and was a nice guy, a really nice guy. So I called Ron a year ago, and he got it on his calendar, and so he arranged for this. Now, subsequent, or in addition to it, you only opened up a winery in Delwood, and he can tell you a little bit about that. But it's with great pride that I introduced to this group a very, very good friend and a very, very successful business person and an exceptional leader, Ron Peltier.
Thanks, Don.
Thank you. Career thing.
Yeah, I'll use this thing. This is less complicated.
Okay.
Thank you, Don. Well, first of all, let me just say this. I'm humbled and honored to be here. And I think overriding all the thoughts that I have, I would say that among all things, I am probably one of the most optimistic guys in the world. And I hope that I can always have that as a guiding force. But it is certainly a tribute to all of you that in a very negative world that can't seem to get out of its own way, it's nice to have some optimists, right? So thank you. So what I thought I would do today, and Don gave me a good script here to talk about, so if I'm going in a direction you don't want to hear and you don't want to listen to, raise your hand and tell me to go some other direction. I'll just tell you a little bit about my story, and I learned through the School of Hard Knocks, so everything that I've learned, I've usually learned getting bumped and bruised, and you know, the business that I'm in, and I've got a couple of 3 wonderful people that are great associates and great people that are in the real estate business, and the company that I was part of for many, many years, Edina Realty, and it's actually the company that was the founding company for Home Service America. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what I'm doing and what I've done, and because I suspect nobody knows who or what Home Service America is. And then I'll digress and kind of tell you how I got there, and then I'll talk about some lessons learned and some thoughts that I have on success and leadership. And then I'll kind of end with my winery, and to the extent that you guys are selling wine, I got wine, and so let me start at just a little bit about Home Service America. Home Service America is a real estate, mortgage, title, insurance enterprise. No place do we market under Home Service America. We're the largest enterprise of its kind. We have real estate, mortgage, title, insurance companies coast to coast. The one that you would know here is Edina Realty, and it is by far and away the largest real estate company in the upper Midwest, one of the largest independently owned companies, and it is part of Home Services of America, and I ran Edina Realty for about 25 years. My brother succeeded me. Beyond that, we have companies from the West Coast to the East Coast, North and South. We're starting to move into Canada, and we're just this year we made some moves in global markets, and our long-term plans are to be in the financial markets of the world, coast to coast and around the globe. So that's where Home Services is today. I started, and I never planned on being in real estate, and I suspect that a lot of you have a similar story. When you're young, and when I was in high school, and I grew up in the, I guess I'll call the inner city of St. Paul, and came from a middle-class family with one of 5 kids. I'm right in the middle, and I had the fortune of having been influenced by a lot of people in my life that have really helped shape who I am. I'm not smart enough to have figured it out on my own, but I got some really good advice, and that's the one thing that I've prided myself on is I ask a lot of questions, and I've taken a lot of advice. I've rejected a lot of advice as well, but through the years, it served me well. So, when I was at Johnson, and I think it's notable and worthwhile talking about that, I was fortunate enough to be in a high school that, if they were known for anything, they were known for hockey. And we were, and we're in the north suburban area, and you guys understand hockey too here in this part of the country and part of the world. But Johnson in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and probably ending in the 80s, was among the premier hockey schools in the state, and was expected to be in the state tournament every year. My 4 brothers, 3 brothers and myself were in the state tournament every year. But what's notable is I played for a guy that never accepted less than 120% effort. And I really, that helped shape a lot of things. I'm a Pisces, so give me a break here. No. So I can't help myself. I'm emotionally driven, and but I played from a fiery Italian. You might remember Luca Tronio. And the fact of the matter is, whatever you did, it was never good enough. And I should digress just a bit, because we talked about Herb Brooks. So when I was a peewee, he's an East Sider, I played for Herb. And when I was a bantam, I played for Herb. And when I was at the University of Minnesota, I played for Herb. And I can tell you, if you ever saw The Miracle on Ice, the one thing that you could never make the guy happy. That was not fabricated. That is the absolute truth, no matter what you did. Even when I was a peewee, if I scored a goal, he said, "Why didn't you pass the damn puck, you puck hog?" And then if you passed, he said, "Why didn't you shoot the puck?" It didn't make any difference what you did. It was never good enough, but it got you thinking. And really, one of the lessons that I'll talk about is I truly think, life is meant to be played all out. It's not to coast through life. A lot of people, and at all walks of life, and people that I come across, they're going through the motions. And I used to hear that all the time. People are just showing up. They're really not committed. They're not really going all out. And it really caused me at an early age to say, you know what? If you're going to do something, go all out or don't do it. And so then I went to the University of Minnesota on a NC2A scholarship, played hockey. I played for 3 guys that could not be more demanding. Herb Brooks, I couldn't get away from, who I say that lovingly, and I was with him the last 4 days of his life at the Hockey Hall of Fame. And I played for Lou Nanne, and I think all of you know Lou Nanne, and Glenn Sonmore. So I had a culture of high expectations, and I was in pre-law, and that's where I was sort of going, not based on what I thought was, or what I thought was the right thing to do, but it really wasn't. And when I graduated from the University of Minnesota the summer of '71, I thought, I have to, I was given some good advice that said, talk to people that you really admire and that have been successful, and find out what caused them to take the direction and what was their success. And I talked to a lot of people But one of the persons that I talked to was then governor. You folks might remember Wendell Anderson. Don, you mentioned him. And Wendell, I went to the governor's mansion, had lunch with him, and the one thing that he told me, we talked a lot of hockey because that was still much in my blood, and he said, you know, the worst mistake I did, this was him, this is his opinion, was to go to law school, which is, I was ready to go to law school in the fall, and he said, if I had to do it over, and he said, you should go to graduate school and get an MBA, don't get a law degree. So I asked a lot of questions, and I talked with a lot of other people, I got lots of other information, but I do give him credit for switching me on a dime, and I spent a year actually talking to people, and I didn't go to law school, and then I ended up going to the University of St. Thomas, and actually had to pay for my education. I was spoiled on a full ride. It was also a full-time job playing hockey at the University of Minnesota, but it was a wonderful experience, and so all of a sudden I had to figure out how to pay for a very expensive school at St. Thomas and get a graduate degree. And there I had the opportunity to, never in my wildest imagination was I planning on going into education, but I had two older siblings that were in education, and I got a call from Elliot Perovich, the principal, and said they'd like to wonder if I would be interested in teaching and coaching in a new model school for the country. And so I was the second person hired. You cannot teach with a BA degree, but you can teach with a graduate degree. And so I had to take some summer school to get a teaching license. And it was a brand new school. They started with sophomores. So I did teach a couple of years. And then I will say this, and one of my lessons learned is you got to find your passion. And teaching just wasn't it. I think it was probably coming from a number of sources. It might have been the state of teaching in the early 70s. Teachers were being disempowered. The students were doing whatever they wanted. And frankly, I was probably wrong, and it's maybe where I was mentally at the time. I said, when I care way more than you guys, I'm in the wrong business. Because I couldn't accept I would sort of the personality of not all the students, but a lot of them. And then in hockey, where I'm very passionate, and a lot of them were going through the motions. Didn't really care. And I said, yeah, I just need to be in a business that's something where I can really be passionate, and I think I'm making a difference while I'm making a living. And so I did start in the spring of '77. I got a real estate license, cold turkey, and I sold for, actually the first 2 months I said I'm never returning to teaching. And I had just finished my graduate degree, and I started selling real estate, and I loved real estate. It got in my blood, and it was really, call it luck, but it was something I was really passionate about. And it's also a very emotional business, and I think these three would say, you know, buying and selling a home is a life event. It's one of the most stressful things that can happen in an individual's life, and it's the most significant financial commitment that they have to make. And so, you know, you're not selling anything. What you're doing is servicing, and you're truly, you know, helping people navigate through a very, very complicated transaction. And I really began to develop sort of a broader, deeper understanding of how important real estate is. And I quickly became a manager, and then a general manager, and then the president and CEO of the company. I became an owner of it. And my partners were 13, 14 years older than I was. And I've said this, they allowed me to live my dream in their world because they let me run it. And they were happy to fish, hunt, and play golf. And that was okay. And I'm eternally grateful. The other alternative probably would have been I would have started my own company, which people did at the time. But I'm also humble enough to say that was a great opportunity for me to cut my teeth there, and then to grow the company. and that's Edina Realty. And then a couple of major inflection points that were very, very significant in how I thought and continued to evolve as a professional in that business, but as an individual, and this is true of every business. You cannot just maintain the business. You got to continue. You innovate or die. You grow or die. And so in the early '80s, when I was kind of given the full run to run Edina Realty, we looked at what we really needed to do to be a better company, and that was to add mortgage and title services to the brokerage business. And we were the first company, real estate brokerage in America, to pioneer loan origination with a brokerage business. And then we add title insurance on it, and then we added property casualty insurance. And so I would tell you the 4 core services that take place at the transfer of a deed and the home buying process and home ownership is the brokerage piece, the mortgage, the title, and then the property and casualty insurance. It's one-stop shopping, if you want to call it what you will, vertical integration of a business model. And then we worked through the '80s. It'd be foolish to say we perfected it. I'd say that we worked on it and we continue to grow it, and thought we had a pretty doggone good business plan and a good business model in that case, and we expanded throughout the state of Minnesota. But what happened, and I was reminded of it here just recently, is the crash. So there was way too many in here that are too young that would not remember the financial crash of October 19th, 1987, when the financial markets crashed. And if you think they crashed in the Great Recession, well, if you go back and look, the crash of 1987, Black Monday, was far worse by percentages. And so my 2 partners, the Rovicks, some of you might know the Rovick family, wonderful, wonderful people. They said, I don't have the stomach for that. And in the mortgage business, the mortgage markets had really gone haywire, and the financial markets did too. And so they said, you know what, Ron, you want to keep growing this company, you maybe want to, and the 3 of us talked, and I'm a grower, and probably maybe too aggressive for where they were at. They loved the first 5 years, and they wanted to sell. They said, you know what, we're probably pretty happy to just take some chips off the table, like a lot of people do growing a company. And so in October of '88, we sold the company. That was another inflection. We sold it to a bank. Actually, it was to an S&L, because banks can't own real estate companies. My 2 partners exited. Wonderful guys, took the money, and they're fishing, hunting, and playing golf yet today and loving every minute of it. I took the mantle of the company and took my ownership, unfortunately, in the stock of, well, it's not unfortunate, but the stock of the S&L. And I learned a lot from what they were doing, because that was the financial crisis. Do you ever remember the Resolution Trust and the bank crisis? There's way too many banks. What I really learned, there's way too many real estate companies. Yet today there's 70,000 real estate companies in America. Not agents, companies. And back then I remember the statistic that there was somewhere like 48,000 banks. Now, for those of you that travel around the world or travel around, whether if you just go north to Canada, there's about 5 major banks in Canada. You go to to Europe and Western Europe, there's 5 or 6 major banks. And here we're overbanked, and clearly you could argue that we're oversubscribed with real estate brokerages. There's about 1.2 million agents, but way too many banks. And when the financial crisis hit, and then by happenstance we became part of bank, they said, we want to buy banks, or S&Ls. They couldn't buy banks. They wanted to buy failed thrifts, and they said, Ron, we love your business model, and you're growing this mortgage, and what do S&Ls want? They want the mortgage piece. And so they said, we're going to buy S&Ls that are failed and turn them around. And they wanted me to buy real estate companies in the same markets. So in 6 years, that 1988 to 1994, Metropolitan Financial Thrift made about 24 acquisitions of failed or underperforming thrifts. Bert Ely of the Office of Thrift Supervision right out of Washington, D.C. was a good friend of Norm Jones, who was the CEO of Metropolitan. And so he had a good pipeline and was buying banks or S&Ls throughout the upper Midwest. Well, I made 27 acquisitions in those same 6 years. And then on July of 1994, I got a call from Norman saying that we're going to make an announcement tomorrow. And it turns out that U.S. Bank, the one that we all know here, is going to announce that they purchased Metropolitan Financial in the morning. And because it was a public company, and I was a major shareholder and had lots of stock and options that I needed to know about it, not say anything. And of course, the thing why he had to tell me that is, oh, by the way, banks can own real estate companies, and they're probably going to be doing something with your company post-acquisition. So indeed, it closed at the end of 88, and I spent 94, and I spent a year trying to buy the company back. We were much bigger, and my partners wanted to get out because we got to be big business beyond what their company was financially. And so then I bought it back, and I closed December of 95 and bought the company back. I took couple of partners in, and I will say another life lesson that I'll throw in here and probably at the end just make again is you can't make a good deal with bad people. I had some partners that, think of it as private equity guys. They were looking to just buy in, hold it for a couple of years, help me, get me to grow it, and then they wanted to sell it again. I said, no, that's not my plan. So they were my partners for a year, and I found some other people to buy them out, and I was basically continuing to trying to find people that allowed me to continue to do this, because I really took a lesson from the banks saying, you know what, there's too many banks in this country, and there's not enough efficiency, and so U.S. Bank was doing that, Norwest, then Wells Fargo. I mean, if you look at the mergers and acquisitions, and I probably got hooked on the Kool-Aid that I was making acquisitions of real estate companies, and then we were loading in mortgage and title and insurance in these companies in the upper Midwest. And so I was looking for a partner. At the end of the day, to fast forward this for you, I ultimately ended up with Warren Buffett as my partner. Best guy you could ever have. He's got all the right values. He doesn't sell anything. Has a lot of expectations, most of which he's not compromising, that you have to have integrity beyond integrity, and you better be honest beyond honest, which was just fine with me. But he was my partner. I will tell you one little story about Warren, because he's a great guy. So we came together in early 2000, and I get a call from him in August of 2000, and he said that, geez, I feel bad. I should have invited you to my celebrity golf tournament, because he said, I know you like to play golf. And I said, I'd love to play golf. I'd love to be at your tournament. So he said, well, remind me, we're going to do it next year. So I do get a call from Warren, since it's a memorable week. I get a call from Warren early in August again, and he said, I want to invite you to my golf tournament. So I was I got the invitation to be there on September 10th, and I flew into, any of you been to Omaha? You know the commercial, go to Omaha? Well, it's fitting. Go to Omaha. It's not much there. But anyway, I flew to Omaha and I thought, wow, look at all the planes here. What's going on? All the private aircraft. Well, his celebrity golf tournament was the top 100 CEOs in America. And why they were there is they played golf, and then Warren would, at the Omaha Country Club, would sit and talk with the people at after dinner. And Warren is, for those that don't maybe know his reputation, he is considered the most respected business mind in the world. And he can take a business, and in 5 minutes he can tell you what drives it, and an incredible guy. And at 88, he just celebrated his 88th birthday. You would not want to get into a mental joust with this guy because you won't have a chance. He is amazing. But anyway, people would pay big bucks, CEOs from around the country, and every name that you could think of was there. Every name, including at the time Dick Kovacevic here, you know, all the big guys. So I got there, and I'll fast forward this because I'm watching my time, but at any rate, I flew in scheduled air. I'm the only damn guy that flew in scheduled air, let me tell you. And so then they said, hey, by the way, there's a very special event. Only a guy like Warren Buffett could pull this off. Warren said, anybody that's interested, they had a cocktail reception on September 10th, and they said be downstairs at the hotel at 6:30 in the morning. If you would like to have something special, they wouldn't tell you what it was. Well, I'm an early riser, and I had nothing else going on, and I was kind of enjoying meeting a bunch of people that I knew of, but never met before. Bill Gates, Bezos, all kinds of people. And anyway, I get downstairs, and they ship us off. It ends up, we go to Offutt Air Force Base. Anybody ever heard of Offutt Air Force Base? Okay, well, a few of you have. Well, turns out that that is the war room. In the event of a national disaster, President's plane flies to Offutt Air Force Base. About 12 stories down in the bottom is a war room with all the red phones and the stuff. So we were at the country club eating, and all of a sudden they said, well, we're going to go. We get to the elevator, and wouldn't you know, there's about 18 guys with all part of the military at Offutt Air Force Base. We were going to get down to the war room, a very special treat, and that's when the plane hit. You can imagine. They didn't say what was going on. Get in your car. We got back to the hotel, and it turns out that then we find out. And the second plane just hit when we got back to the hotel. So you had these 100 CEOs that were very, very highly respected, and virtually everyone you would know in the who's who of CEOs in America. And they said, we have to wait to see what Warren wants to do and whatever. Well, the long story short was, you remember they closed all the airports? Now, these guys all have private planes, but you couldn't go anywhere. And so they ultimately, we played golf that day. The most memorable day of my life. Sorry. And then we had dinner. And what I didn't tell you is Warren said, when he called me a month earlier, he said, hey, do you want to have breakfast the next morning? I'd never really had the chance to sit and have a private one-on-one long conversation with him. He said, I want to have breakfast with you. Let's do that. So, well, so then, you know, we're playing golf, and then he stayed until, normally was like a 2-hour event that he would talk, was like 4 hours. And it was really he's a calming effect. And he's an optimist beyond an optimist. If any of you have ever had the pleasure to hear him, there's nobody in this world more optimistic than Warren Buffett. None. And anyway, at the end, I went up and I said, Mr. Buffett, I'm assuming we're off for tomorrow. And he said, why? Can't you make it? I said, well, sure, I can make it. I just figured with all this stuff, I'm probably not high on the agenda. Well, I said, I'm saving the morning for you. So I get there early in the morning, and I'll just leave it with this comment that almost anybody that you could think of that was who's who, including the Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, calling Warren Buffett, wondering what this was going to do on the economy, in a very rattled time. This is the day after September 11th. Warren never took a call. I sat with him for 2.5 hours. He's my partner. So anyway, the rest of that is he's still my partner. We're 20+ years partners, and keep growing Home Services America, and that's really what I do. What I've taken from all of that, a lot of it from Warren, a lot of it from my upbringing, in terms of lessons learned. I think life in general is a full contact sport, isn't it? And I think, I'd say this, I didn't have this early on, but I think I found it fairly quickly, and I talk to people all the time that work with me and for me as finding out, what do you want? What's your vision for who you want to be and what you want to be? And corporate leaders are always expected to have a vision, right? An elevator speech. Where are you going? What are you doing? And the old adage is, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. And I think it's really important that all of us have a vision for where we're going and what we want to do, and that we are going to continue to adjust it, of course. But not having a vision out there where you're going, and being a hockey player in a different way. Wayne Gretzky's been credited with saying, and all of you have heard it, I don't go where the puck is, I go where the puck is going. I think if you really want to know where you're going, you got to be thinking about, where do I really want to go in life, and what do I want? And I think having that vision and continuing to set it and adjust it is important. I don't think these are in any order, but I think being passionate about what you're doing, and if you're passionate about what you're doing, you're really not working. I would tell you, I'm working today because I've never worked a day in my life. I like what I'm doing. It's a lifestyle. It's who I am and what I am, and I know we all know people that hate what they're doing. They hate what they're doing, and life's too short for that. There's no second acts. You don't get a chance to replay it. Find something that you like to do, and it has nothing to do with making more money. It's what you like to do and what you're passionate about, and I would say find that, because when you do, then you're going to play full out, and life's a lot more fun. I think, and I subscribe to this. There's a book that's out, I forget the title of it, but it really talks about wigs. Do you know what a wig is?
Wildly important goal.
You bet it. Somebody's read it, yeah. A wildly important goal. I set wildly important goals for myself every year, and sometimes I adjust them every half year. But goals that I want to achieve. Yeah, again, I think in the spirit of, if you don't know where you're going, probably any road will get you there. I know what is important to me, and I've got kind of milestones that I want to meet them. And if I meet them, I might try another one. But having some goals that are important to you, and they're not all business related. It might be you want to have kids. You want to have 3 kids by the time you're X. You want to buy a lake home. You got to have goals, and you got to have something that is, that you're willing to work for. And again, I think a lot of people dream, but they stop there. They don't put those goals down. And I'll tell you, I live and die by my goals, and I keep changing them. And I think that's good, but I know what I'm working for, so I get up every morning and I'm thinking about what's important to me. So I really subscribe to a wig, or multiple wigs. Number 4 is, I mentioned, is good people. I know Warren has said this, that you can never rise above your centers of influence. And so if your centers of influence are negative, if they lack motivation, if they lack whatever, or if they're on the other side, if your people that are influencing you are successful, dynamic, positive, you're going to gravitate, and you're going to be like them. Always hang around people that are better than you. And it isn't financially, it's just in general. And you're going to tend to work in that direction versus what we all know, but we maybe say it differently, is you're a product of your environment. You hang around an environment that's into crime, into drugs, into, whatever, you're probably going to adopt that. If you hang around people that are highly successful and highly dynamic, you're going to develop that too. So I would say pick your crowd wisely and pick your influencers wisely, because you don't know how, and your kids and your grandkids. And so on number 5 is you got to be resilient. And I know you talked about it. Life throws a lot of curveballs, and whether it's in your job, in your career, I've shared with you a few curveballs when the financial markets collapsed. When my partners wanted to sell, I didn't want to sell. In hindsight, it was the best thing in the world. I probably would have just been still running Edina Realty with them. Not that there was anything wrong with that, but I like this story better, and I like my partner better. So that old adage, make lemonade out of lemons, and being resilient, and looking at being an optimist, and looking at, okay, here's the challenge, what's the solution, and how do you make that challenge an opportunity? There's plenty of ways to do that, but it's how we look at it, and it's mostly our own personal, way of dealing with challenges. Many people will tell you, if you read a lot, that we're going to have another downturn, whether it's in 2 months, 6 months. It's probably going to be triggered by a global event, could be triggered by an election event, a terrorist event, but we're going to see another one. We've been riding a wave here of good times for some since the Great Recession, and how you react to it, it can be just as much a great opportunity as it can be a great challenge. It's just how your attitude is and what you do with it. And number 6 is protect your reputation. We only get one chance to write the story and the script on who we are and what we are. And particularly with social media and the internet, you can't hide, right? And you probably couldn't 20 or 30 or 40 years, but for certain that having a reputation that you can be proud of, and that's a legacy for your kids or your grandkids, I think is really, really important. And I think we need to be authentic, and we need to be, and we need to work hard to protect our reputation, because at the end of the day, it's the only thing that you got. So keep it. I'd like to just talk about having fun, having a little humor, self-deprivation, and being humble. They say that smugness leads to arrogance, and arrogance leads to mediocrity, and pride always comes before the fall. We've seen lots of people that are pretty powerful, pretty arrogant, pretty smug, and maybe sometimes it feels good when you see them fall. But I think you're much more empathetic and maybe much more understanding if someone walks through life and has humility and doesn't get full of the, as my coaches used to say, Peltier, don't read your clippings. They're not important. So I think I think it's really important as we walk through life. And then I would say the last comment I would make is read everything you can. You can never stop learning, and you can never stop improving. And in this fast-paced, changing world, I think anybody that thinks they know it all is on their way out in any walk of life, in any business, because it changes faster than you can really plan. And I know the people that I admire most, and I spend a good deal of my time reading everything I can on business and what's going on in the world, because it does affect my business and what's going on in my world. And to be oblivious of it is I think, is shameful. So I think if I can encourage young people that are here, but people in general, read everything you can and be knowledgeable about what's going on in your business and the threats to your business, but also in general. It makes you a better leader, and it makes you just a better person. So with that, I'm going to just talk about, they say how you take a large fortune and turn it into a small one. I started a winery. I am still working at, if you call it, as I said, I'm not really working, but I do want to just kind of share with you the thoughts on how I got there, and again, it really wasn't by accident. To tell you how persistent I am, there's a piece of property just east of White Bear Lake in Delwood that if you drive that way on 96, you probably thought, what is this beautiful piece of property with nothing on it? So we first discovered it, my wife and I, in about '83, and I kept thinking, who owns this piece of property? It's so beautiful, the trees are magnificent, and anyway, we discovered that it was a James J. Hill property, and in 1986, I had the unique opportunity, my wife and I, to tender an offer on the property, and it's 200 acres, private lake in the center, spectacular place. It's a 30,000 square foot mansion that the Hills built, and you can't see it, and that's the way they liked it. And they say that Fitzgerald was there along with a lot of people of the time. They loved, the Hills loved to party. If you know the Hill family story at all, they had 9 kids, and so they bought this piece of property, and they gave it to their second daughter, Rachel. And what I found out when I wrote the offer and they accepted back in 1986 is that James J. Hill was clever enough to put in the documents. It could not be, now this is coming from a real estate guy here, that I learned something. He put in there that it could not be sold, subdivided, or parceled until the death of the last grandchild. And he did that, by the way, on a big mining piece of property up in northern Minnesota. The only 2 pieces. How they got all these properties, that you folks might know this, but the U.S. government has a way of entitling certain companies or certain entities, industries, when they want to, support something, a la Tesla, the tax credit. But if you go back 100+ years ago, when they were trying to build the Transcontinental Railroad and the railroad system, the U.S. government not only provided immigrant labor at very cheap wages and supported all of that, but the other thing that they did to build the railroad system out and to get it done right is that they entitled the railroad barons a section of land, and not expecting you folks all to be real estate experts, but a section of land of 640 acres. So for every mile of track laid, you've got a section of land. Do you know how much land that is? So the railroad barons like James J. Hill, they had land all over the country. The Carnegies, the Rockefellers, they got their wealth. 110 years ago, 100 years ago, the railroad barons were the titans of technology today. They were the wealthiest people in the world. And so he then went ahead and meticulously gave big parcels of land to each of his kids, 9 kids, and then of course he did other things with all the other land. But North Oaks is a piece over in, the Wayzata. He had a couple of pieces of property right in Delwood, the Slade Farm, and then the piece that I bought. So I at the end of the day, I bought this property when the last grandchild died in 2010, and I didn't know what to do with it. The easiest thing I could have done and should have done, not should have, was being a real estate person, as I could have developed the land into about 70 spectacular homes all up North Oaks, if you will. I didn't want to do that. I was at an age and stage in my life where I wasn't wanting and looking to do that. I did a bunch of research, and so I took the most beautiful piece of ground that it was a prairie that had never had any chemicals on it, never did anything, and so I started a vineyard, and that was 7 years ago. I worked with the University of Minnesota, and I was building grapes or planting 2 acres of grapes every year. I now have 12 acres of vines. And what a lot of people don't know, so I'm going to share this with you. I'm proud of Minnesota and being a U of M grad. Most people do not know that apples are not indigenous to this state. 100 years ago, and don't quote me on the time, the University of Minnesota Agriculture Department figured out a way to keep apple trees alive in this state, and others. They call it cold climate. But the most revered apples in the world are Honeycrisp, developed here. The most revered apples in the world. So just take that thought, and as I read and did a lot of research, they have been working on other fruits for the last 50 years, grapes, but pears, cherries, other fruits that I probably don't even know about. And I've done a lot of things agriculturally, and they told me when I went to visit them and talk in 2011, 10 and 11, is that grape growing in the northern country, they call it great cold climate vines, are quickly rivaling some of the best wines grown in America, even though they don't get any of the respect. And I'll just tell you one other thing. Do you know what latitude parallel we're on? Any geography experts? 45th. Do you know what Napa Valley is? 45. Do you know what Bordeaux, France is? The world's epicenter? 45. There you go. Same growing season. It's just we got a little colder winter, and right? But with global climate change, we may be the epicenter. So I have to tell you one other thing about wine that I learned, and as I was doing my research, because I'm old enough, and there's a few other people that I know are old enough that would relate to this, is that in the 70s, if you thought about wine, how do you think the world felt about California wine? Well, I'll help you out because it's not a test, but it was junk. It's the same way that we used to think about products that came from first Japan, then China, that it was junk, right? And then, oh, by the way, Japan came up with Honda, and then they went from their products not being good to being superior to anything else, right? And so they call it the Judgment of Paris, 1976. Kind of by accident, the Parisians and the French think they invented wine, and they probably did, because vines are 400, 500 years old. And at the Judgment of Paris in 1976, oh, by the way, there's actually a movie out. You'd love 90% true, little added a few things. It's called Bottle Shock. But at the Judgment of Paris, 1976, they had all these unbelievably well-known wineries in France, blind wine tasting. They invited 2 wineries in California, Stag's Leap, Chateau Montelino. Stag's Leap was the red wine, the cab. Chateau Montelino was the Chardonnay. What do you think happened? Stag's Leap won the red, Chateau Montelino won the white, and the world was shocked. And all of a sudden, California wine in late 70s went from junk to unbelievable, and now there are more than a few people that think California wine, sets the standard for wine in the world. So think about that, about cold climate. We're not there yet. So I built a winery, and I started 2.5 years ago. actually 3 years ago now, and I opened actually October of last year. And so we have a winery, it's an event center, a lot of weddings. It's not a commercial. I have 7 grandkids with 2 married kids. 7 was my number since I was the youngest I could remember, right through all of my athletic days. I'm partial to 7. I'm very superstitious. I got 7 grandkids. It's 7 vines. So anyway, it's a pleasure to be here. I think my time is up. I just want to say thank you. It's a real honor to be here, and I'll take any questions.
Yeah, how about a few questions?
Sure. That's what I usually do, shut them right down.
Go ahead.
Sure.
I'll ask. One of the books that a lot of us have read is this book called Grit, and talks about grit and resilience and being able to come back from bad things. And it sounds like that's been I mean, I'm not sure if you kind of learned that in hockey and growing up in St. Paul, but I mean, there must be a certain amount of grit to you and an ability to bounce back.
It is. I all my life I seem to have done things in some ways the hard way. So I'm probably sharing some things that maybe some of you will relate to. So when I decided to join a real estate company, I looked around and so I joined Edina Realty. Now on this end of town, let me tell you, folks. I didn't have a lot of warm feelings for Edina. When I was playing hockey at Johnson, my coach had, hopefully, is anybody here from Edina? Can I say this and be okay? All right, well, so, my old coach, Lou Catronio, he was great with words, and he said, there was a few expletives, but it was Treasure Island. And, we were the poor kids, and he always used to say, this is when we had outdoor ice as well as indoor, and we had to put up the boards. And he said, those guys over there, they hire it done. We had to put it, so, but I started Edina. There was one little tiny office in Roseville here in Edina, and I had to do a lot of talking. So what's an East Side guy doing at Edina Realty? Not a lot of warm feelings about Edina on this end of town. And so, and real estate, has had plenty of ups and downs. I didn't want to bore with it, but I did learn a lot from hockey, and I think sports, for me it was hockey, but it could be football or basketball. Every day you got to get up and somebody else wants your job. They want your job and they want you out of there right now, and if you get hurt, that's probably okay. Even if they're good team members, they all, the real competitors want to be first line, and they wanted this or they want that. And I think life is filled with that, but if you're in the band and somebody wants first bassoon or whatever, same thing. And if you're an actor, if you're in theater, I just think too many people are not resilient, and I think some of our athletic programs, as young kids, everybody gets a trophy no matter how bad they are. That's not right. I'm sorry. I'm a guy that's bothered by the fact that they got 2 classes of hockey. And yes, more kids can play, but life is competitive, and why teach people the wrong lessons early on that everybody wins when they don't? So.
Kind of running out of time, but Ron, thank you very,
Yeah,
very
you're
much. Before you run off, here are a couple of things here.
Thank you.